the Waiparaita Trust. So, there's really these big events now happening all over the country, which people right across the board, Māori and non-Māori, are getting involved with. Now, and that's great.
I've just had a text here. Doc do an internal Matariki Honours. Here's one here, Lewis. I do not support Matariki Honours. The whole point, Lewis Holden, of the Honours is to be honoured by the royal family. The honours... I'm reading it here.
That's my point too.
The honours would hold no meaning as there'd be no real backing to the honour. What would you say, Lewis?
I think that probably is the fundamental issue here in terms of monarchy versus ideas of citizenship. And I look at honours in terms of honouring people within our society that are doing great things. If your viewpoint is that honours are about the royal family handing out gongs to the great and good, then I suppose it would make more sense that it's to do with the king. But I think actually if we were to test that amongst the general public, most people would say the purpose of honours is actually to elevate people who've done great things for our country.
Can I just jump in there, because I don't think that's entirely clear. I think what people are saying is if we are going to continue with the King's honours, then it needs to be on a holiday that is related to the royal family. If we're going to get rid of those, then let's go to something completely different.
I know what the panel poll is going to be about tomorrow, that's for sure. Wonderful. Lewis Holden, thank you, and Professor Alan Blackman, Ali Jones, great panel. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Wallace Chapman. I am back tomorrow with the Horns, 3:45, Checkpoint, and Lisa Owen is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei, it's too late. The alleged words of a murder accused to her husband the night he found his 3 daughters dead. The state of Victoria disqualifies itself as host of the 2026 Commonwealth Games, claiming the cost just isn't worth it. We talked to the New Zealand Games boss about the race to find a replacement. The $400 million countdown revamp and rebrand. So what's that mean for the price of carrots, broccoli and loo roll? The supermarket's managing director joins us. Dune hoons are cutting up rough on the Kaipara Harbour, and a mysterious unidentified object that has appeared out of the blue on a beach in Western Australia. You can watch us live on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. The father of the 3 girls killed by their mother in their Timaru home has told a court his wife was not a nurturing mother. Lauren Ann Dickerson has pleaded not guilty to 3 charges of murder. Adam Burns reports from the High Court at Christchurch.
Graham Dickerson described his wife as quiet and untalkative in the weeks before his 3 children died. Now back in South Africa, he gave evidence this afternoon via audio-visual link. He told the Crown his wife became annoyed because he had to start his new Timaru job sooner than planned. Earlier in the day, video footage of Dr Dickerson's 2021 police interview following the deaths played in court. The trial continues tomorrow.
The Prime Minister says it's too short notice for New Zealand to bid to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. The Victorian state government has withdrawn from hosting the event, citing major cost blowouts from $2 billion originally forecast to nearer $7 billion. Asked if Aotearoa New Zealand might bid, Chris Hipkins says it's not possible.
Typically, we'd need quite a long lead time to host a Commonwealth Games. We haven't done that for some time. We are interested in hosting the Commonwealth Games, but I think doing it with a very, very short notice like that would prove to be pretty challenging for New Zealand.
The Commonwealth Games Federation says it's committed to finding a new venue for 2026. Football fans in the US are jetting to New Zealand for the beginning of the FIFA Women's World Cup. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is estimating about 15,000 fans will be travelling to Aotearoa from the United States alone. Kristen Pariseau, who has flown over from the US, says it's been her dream to attend a cup for years. She was determined to come to this year's event no matter what.
As soon as 2019 ended, I regretted not going to France, so I just started saving money, putting as much money aside as I could, and started saving Sky Miles for the flights. And I've been planning this for 4 years, so I probably would have went even if they were playing in Antarctica.
Kristen Paraso also created a Facebook page for US fans coming here that already has more than 8,000 followers. The Transport Minister says he has asked for an urgent briefing about the Puhoi to Warkworth motorway. Engineers are trying to stabilise a slow-moving landslide above a short section near Warkworth that risks deforming the $900 million new road. David Parker says he is waiting to find out more from Waka Kotahi.
I certainly have asked for an urgent briefing, but I've done that this morning and I haven't yet received it. But if the transport authorities thought the road wasn't safe to drive on at the moment, they would have closed it.
The agency says concrete barriers and a temporary traffic management plan are in place to ensure the landslide poses no risk to road users. Opposition parties are accusing the government of only trying to look tough on crime because it's 3 months out from the election. Yesterday, the government announced a suite of new measures to target youth and gang crime. They include making the use of young people to commit a crime and posting crimes online aggravating factors at sentencing. Earlier this afternoon, it committed to building 2 new youth justice facilities for higher needs young offenders. National Justice spokesperson Paul Goldsmith says the announcements are more about the election instead of any genuine commitment to tackle crime.
They know in 88 days they're going to face the music because they have been soft on crime for 6 years and then changing your tune, doing a massive U-turn and pretending to be tough 3 months before the election won't wash for New Zealand.
Paul Goldsmith says the announcements are a knee-jerk reaction. And New Zealand hip-hop legend Herman has died. Herman Joseph Loto Sakaria was an Auckland-based rapper who performed and recorded under the stage name Herman. The former member of the Otara Millionaires Club and Radio Backstab was often referred to as the godfather of South Auckland hip-hop. In sport, the organisation responsible for the Commonwealth Games is blaming the Victorian state government for the cost blowout behind its decision to withdraw from hosting the 2026 Games. Victoria was awarded the Games last year and were initially forecast to cost $2 billion to run, but Victoria Premier Dan Andrews says the real cost could be closer to $7 billion. Sports editor Stephen Hewson has more.
In a statement, Commonwealth Sport says the cost that the Victoria Government has quoted is 50% higher than what it was told last month. Commonwealth Sport says Victoria's decision to include more sports and an additional regional hub has added considerable expense and goes against their advice. It also says that it was only given 8 hours notice of the withdrawal and no opportunity to discuss a solution. The organisation says it's committed to finding a venue for 2026, although New Zealand's already ruled itself out as a possible candidate.
World champions Australia will play their first cricket tests in New Zealand in 8 years following the T20 series in February. The Black Caps will host the first test in Wellington in late February with the second and final test in Christchurch in March. In their last visit to New Zealand in 2016, they won 2-0, which also marked Brenda McCullum's international farewell. And the Breakers have signed American power forward Zylan Cheatham as their first import player for the upcoming Australian National Basketball League season. The 27-year-old has played in the NBA for both the Utah Jazz and the New Orleans Pelicans. And that's the news.
Record heat continues cooking the US.
This is the kind of heat that, can turn deadly. We had at least one death over the weekend. A hiker died.
The government cracks down on youth crime.
These are children that we're talking about. I don't want to write them off completely, but I do want them to know that there are consequences for what they have been doing.
And Matamata gets flash with their trash.
We're getting better at recycling, but also our volume of waste going to landfill is also increasing.
All news, no rubbish. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Western areas from Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula, Taumaranui and Taihape. Partly cloudy with isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay fine. Bay of Plenty and Taupo, also Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa. Generally fine, but the odd shower tomorrow. Buller and Westland often cloudy with showers, turning to rain about southern Westland tomorrow evening, possibly heavy. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury mainly fine again with high cloud. Isolated showers developing about Nelson and the Marlborough Sounds tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, excluding Stewart Island, mostly fine. Rain spreading slowly north tomorrow afternoon and evening with heavy falls and snow lowering to 300 metres. Fiordland and Stewart Island, periods of rain, possibly heavy tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods. RNZ National. It is 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The father of 3 daughters killed by their mother at their Timaru home has told the court via audio-visual link that his children preferred him and his wife was not a nurturing mother. Speaking from his home in South Africa, orthopaedic surgeon Graham Dickerson said whilst his wife cared for the girls, she was often emotional and wouldn't pick them up for a cuddle very often. Lauren Ann Dickerson has pleaded not guilty to the murder of her 2-year-old twin daughters Carla and Maya and their older sister Leonie in September 2021. Her legal defence will be built on arguments of insanity and infanticide. Our reporter Adam Burns was in the Christchurch High Court in a warning. This story contains distressing content.
Graham Dickerson cut a shattered figure, describing what happened the night his world turned upside down. The police interview of Dr. Dickerson just hours after returning home to find his 3 daughters dead in their beds played for the court today. The court ruled footage of Dr. Dickerson not be recorded. His statements are revoiced. He told police detective Sam Hawker he arrived home and saw his wife in the kitchen.
She looked strange. She looked wobbly, as if she wanted to fall over, and I asked her if she's okay. She didn't really reply, and I asked her what's the matter, and she told me it's too late. I can't remember the exact words. I asked too late for what, and then asked her if she took something. Why is she looking like this? I assumed the kids were sleeping.
The Crown argues his wife made unsuccessful attempts to asphyxiate the girls and then smothered them with their blankets. Dr. Dickerson often had his head in his hands when questioned by police.
I yelled loudly, not something specific. I think I just screamed. I screamed repeatedly. I think I might have asked her what she'd done as well. Cried. I can't say for how long or what I went out. I'm not sure I went out. I went back in. I went out. I sat outside. I'm not sure how long. I wasn't sure what to do.
The deaths of 6-year-old Leonie and 2-year-olds Carla and Maya happened only a month after arriving in New Zealand from South Africa. The court heard how Mrs. Dickerson struggled during isolation periods prior to the move. Her husband also described her as not a nurturing mother.
She would always make sure that there were clean clothes, food to eat. She always made sure the kids are where they needed to be. She was not a nurturing mother. The kids preferred me, not so much Liane anymore because she's a big girl, but the twins definitely preferred me.
Having returned to South Africa, Dr. Dickerson gave evidence in this afternoon via audio-visual link. Crown Prosecutor Andrew McRae asked him about Mrs. Dickerson's demeanour upon arriving in the country.
How Lauren was quieter, I think, over this period upon arrival in New Zealand. Can you just tell us, please, what you mean by that? How different was she over this period from what you had experienced in the 15 years you'd been married?
Dr. Dickerson says his wife was prone to periods where she was more quieter and reserved, but the weeks before the deaths felt different. Mr. McRae asked how Dr. Dickerson began his new job in Timaru sooner than planned.
If I can focus in then on Lauren's reaction to those change in work arrangements, how would you describe her reaction was to that from what you observed?
The court heard how Mrs. Dickerson was annoyed at her husband for having to start work earlier. The trial continues in the High Court tomorrow.
Adam Burns reporting there. It is 11 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Scratched before the Games even started, the Australian state of Victoria has pulled out of hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games, blaming billion-dollar cost blowouts. The Games was initially budgeted to cost $2.6 billion, but that's skyrocketed to $7 billion and potentially beyond. Today's announcement by the state premier blindsided athletes, businesses and local mayors and was a far cry from the enthusiasm shown by Daniel Andrews when Victoria took the hosting role just last year. Now he says the numbers simply don't add up.
Look, I've made a lot of difficult calls, a lot of very difficult decisions in this job. This is not one of them. frankly, $6 to $7 billion for a 12-day sporting event. We are not doing that. That does not represent value for money. That is all cost and no benefit.
Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews there. Back here, the announcement also came as a complete shock, with New Zealand Olympic Committee CEO Nikki Nichols saying there were no signs of a problem.
Definitely not, and all the communication we've had from the Commonwealth Games Federation, right up to last month, through their board meetings and meetings with Victorian Government, have all been positive and consistent, with their bid. So it has come as a shock.
So right up till when it was announced, you were under the impression everything was going along swimmingly?
Yes, that's been the communication all the way along.
So what do you think about the abrupt notice?
Well, I think obviously we've just absorbing the information that you've seen today as well, and clearly there's quite a large blowout in their costs. I think it's really important to think about the Victorian bid, and it's really been founded on significant investment in housing, transport and infrastructure. So it is quite different to previous models. So that's probably just something we have to reflect on.
What do you mean by that, Nikki, that potentially they didn't need to be spending all that money?
Well, that was a decision by the Victorian Government to have a regionally based Commonwealth Games, as opposed to obviously using infrastructure in Melbourne and so forth. But if we go back to Birmingham just 1 year ago, what Birmingham did demonstrate is you could run a really vibrant and exciting sports program, but also have one that's economically viable. So I think that's something for us to think about, particularly for New Zealand still really interested in 2034.
And what are the cost estimates for us for a bid?
Well, it's still too early to say, but we do know that Birmingham was 4 to 5 times less than what the numbers are being quoted for Victoria. So I suppose that just shows quite a different focus and model that the Victorian Government chose. And so for us, we've got to make sure we right-size the event in New Zealand. We've got a lot of work to do in a feasibility, but we believe we are really confident that we could put something together that would have economic benefit for New Zealand.
Do you see anyone stepping in for these games that don't have a home now?
Definitely, and we're really confident the Commonwealth Games Federation will find another bidder, even in the last couple of hours.
They struggled, though, Nikki, to find this bidder, though, didn't they? So, realistically?
Well, I think there were a number of parties interested in Victoria at the time, and they did choose Victoria for a number of reasons. So we're really confident that they will find someone, and we look forward to being able to share that with our athletes as soon as possible.
Are you going to speak to the government about bringing forward our bid?
I think it's just too soon for us, and we've certainly been in contact with government, major events in Sport New Zealand through this afternoon as well. But we think 2034 is the right time for us, and we'll stick to our plan.
When do you find out about the games that we are bidding for?
That won't be until at least 2025, maybe into 2027. So we've still got a lot of time. One of the reasons we wanted to signal 2034 was because this year we will decide on 2030 as well. And we didn't want 2 countries to put their hands up for 2030 and being given 30 and 34. So that was why we sort of wanted to make sure we let people know that we were out there.
Are you not concerned that this is the death knell for the Commonwealth Games?
Absolutely not. And I think, 12 months ago, we were all so enthralled with Birmingham. Our athletes were amazing, 50 medals across the team. The event itself was spectacular. And, what the positive impact into that community post as well has also been really positive. So we know the model can work. We know there is a role for sport in the Commonwealth and the role that sport can play in the Commonwealth. So there are lots of positives that flow from there. We're just going to make sure that we focus on the right model for us, and certainly I'm sure Commonwealth Games Federation will be focused on that.
But can you be confident, Nikki, that the benefits are equal to or better than the costs? Because obviously the Premier of Victoria said his was not a hard decision. This was not value for money, he said.
Yeah, well, I think, and there's a lot of literature and public analysis on Birmingham, and I think, there's a model there that tells you can do it. I think the Victorian bid was quite different and it was quite innovative, but maybe that's up to them to decide if they've got that right or wrong.
And that's New Zealand Olympic Committee CEO Nikki Nicol. Meanwhile, all other Australian state premiers have ruled out hosting the Games. Let us know what you think about that. And should New Zealand push ahead with the bid for the 2034 Commonwealth Games? How much would you be prepared to pay to host? Text us on 2101 or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Waka Kotahi claims the multi-million-dollar Puhoi to Warkworth motorway is resilient and safe, despite needing a major patch-up just a month after opening due to a landslide that is still moving. And it's a problem the Transport Agency knew about before the ribbon was even cut on the $880 million project. Cracks have appeared in two concrete barriers after recent storms reactivated a no-in slip. Reports obtained by RNZ show the earth is moving towards the carriageway at a stop-start rate, at times exceeding 30 centimetres a week. Yet Waka Kotahi's General Manager of Transport Services, Brett Glidden, reckons it's not a major problem.
It's not bad at all. Look, I've got full confidence that the road is resilient and safe. We have got one site that we know of that has got a deep-seated movement happening underneath the road that needs to be fixed. That fix is underway currently and will be completed by October. And once that's done, pretty much all the work required for full completion of the road is done.
So when you talk about that one problem site, is this the area in the report where they say it's moving up to 30 centimetres a week, potentially?
Yeah, so that site's been known for some time, and when we were getting towards near the end of the project, the builder commissioned a report, which I think you've seen, a 300-page report that looked at all the slip sites and all the cut batters across the whole project to understand the risk profile, to be confident that they meet the design life, and to be sure that the road is going to be resilient. That report picked up two areas where there was some concerns. One was this known site, another one was another site where there was a drain that had been cut. That site got fixed. This second site was identified as one that needed to be fixed. We then commissioned a further report to understand what the risk of that site was and what the fix potentially needed to be. Once we got confidence from the builder that there was a fix, the risk was very low, we agreed with the builder that rather than holding the road closed, that we open the road because there was no risk to the road, but they could complete the fix once the road is open.
Okay, moving up to 30 centimetres a week, and then there is the potential, the report says, that some landslide movement is occurring across the full width of the carriageway. Now, if you knew this was a problem and potentially a reoccurring problem, why didn't you avoid that area in some way in the design?
Because this whole part of the country is a very unstable area of country. So it's not a matter of picking the road up and moving it 50 metres to one side to avoid it, because you just open up a whole lot more problems. And that's just proven by look at the existing road. So the existing road has had numerous slips in the last 12 months because of the geology through this area. So it's not a simple matter of just avoiding it. So
you built an $880 million motorway in an area that you knew was unstable?
No, we built an $800 million motorway through very challenging country like we do a lot of places in New Zealand. We built it to very high design standards, and we're confident that it's incredibly resilient. Of course, that land has to be treated and make sure that it is safe and that it meets the design standards. This is one location where further work was required to meet those design standards, which is now happening.
The fix that you say will be complete by October, is that it? You'll never have to patch that bit again and it'll be safe and secure, resilient, done?
Correct. Yep, that's the purpose of the fix.
How confident are you of that, though, when we know from these reports that it is a reoccurring landslide triggered by bad weather earlier this year? How do you know it won't happen again?
Because we've done a design that meets the 100-year design requirement. Up until then, it had been just an engineered batter. Now we're actually putting some piles in to stop that movement. It's going to be a much more robust design, and we're confident that will hold it in place.
But there's cracks in the concrete barrier, right? And when you built it, you thought the design was 100-year resilient, yet you've got these cracks and you're having to do a patch-up.
Look, when we built it, like all these things, it's not exact science. This is engineering, and the earth is moving, and there's a lot of design assumptions that go into the design of these things. So we built it, the contractor built it to the standard that they had the design for. It was known it was moving, we were monitoring it. We had this report commissioned to make sure and give us confidence that the design was working. What that has shown is that further work was needed. That's not uncommon on any of these projects. That further work is now underway. We could have kept the road closed until it was completed. We decided that it was so low risk that we may as well open the road because we wanted to get the benefits for the public and complete that fix later.
Have you been a little bit disingenuous and a bit tricky about it? You had the Prime Minister there cutting a ribbon, saying that this was a resilient, reliant stretch of road and safer when you knew it was slipping.
Not at all, no. I think I stand by that. In fact, the remedial on the site had started before the road opened. So we knew that this needed to be fixed, and we had started the repair prior to it opening the road. But we could do that behind concrete barriers. We could do it safely without any risk to the road, and we allowed the contractor to complete that repair once the road is open. So we stand by the fact that this is a resilient road, and it's proven to be so far in the first few weeks of opening.
And that's Brett Glidden from Waka Kotahi, 22 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, we're always keen for your feedback. Do get in touch. Let us know what you think of that. The Puhoi to Warkworth motorway, it's been open about a month. It's having a major patch-up, should be finished by October. What do you make of that? Safe and resilient, they say. Also, Commonwealth Games, should New Zealand continue on with its bid for the, 2034 Games? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go through the headlines now. Anna Thomas, mina pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. Graham Dickerson, whose wife is on trial for the death of their 3 young girls at their Timaru home, has told the Christchurch High Court that while she cared for her daughters, Lauren Ann Dickerson was not nurturing. Lauren Ann Dickerson denies murder. The 2026 Commonwealth Games are in doubt after the Australian state of Victoria walked away saying the forecast cost was ballooning towards $7 billion. The Commonwealth Games Federation says it's committed to finding a venue, but Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has ruled out a Kiwi bid. Waka Kotahi says the $880 million Puhoi to Warkworth motorway north of Auckland is safe, despite a slow-moving landslide that's left a section under repair a month after opening. The Transport Agency says it knew about the problem, which could cost up to $7 million to fix before the road opened. Transport Minister David Parker wants an urgent briefing. The Green Party says the government should be putting more resources into community-led crime interventions and not more youth justice facilities. Labor today committed to building 2 detention centres for higher needs young offenders, one in Auckland and one in Christchurch. National says Labor's trying to look tough ahead of the election. Now, looking at weather, not weather, actually, let's have a look at traffic. And there's just one notice here for Pawatahanui and Wellington commuters due to roadworks near Brady Road. There is currently a 30-kilometre temporary speed restriction in place. Expect significant delays as the westbound queue is now back to State Highway 58 and State Highway 2 interchange. And those are the headlines.
Ngā mihi, Anna. It is just 2 sleeps to go until the world's biggest women's sporting event kicks off right here in Auckland. The tournament is set to be a major moment in the careers of the football Ferns. Joining us now is sports reporter John T. Dine. John T., what is the feeling among the Ferns so close to game day?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, we're getting pretty close to kick-off now, and speaking to some of the players today, there are definitely some nerves, but more so excitement. This is going to be the biggest moment in pretty much all of these players' careers. It doesn't get much bigger than a World Cup in your own backyard, Lisa. Now, with this football's third squad, there is a good mix of youth and experience. 10 of the women have never actually played at a senior World Cup before. Among them is rookie Michaela Foster. She is actually only in her first year with the team, so a pretty big debut season. Foster has actually captained New Zealand at an age group World Cup, should I say, but playing in front of a sold-out Eden Park in a World Cup, obviously a very different story. So she and some of the other younger squad members, they'll be relying on those players who have been there and done that, including her captain.
Got 3 girls all in their 5th World Cup, which is incredible to even think about, really. And obviously for me, Ali Riley's a left back, and that's where I want to be and where I play. And I've grown up watching her and how she plays, and she's really owned that position for the Ferns, and also overseas. She's someone who I've looked up to in that role, and Ria too, the way she kind of can play multiple positions and kind of is vocal, and it's amazing to learn from them.
So as Foster just mentioned, there are players who are obviously going to be on the other end of that experience scale. Some will be appearing in their 5th World Cup, which is a pretty incredible achievement. One of those veterans, of course, Annalie Longo. She sees the World Cup as a platform for her young teammates to make a name for themselves. She told RNZ today that they're in the shop window, if you will, meaning the football world is watching them, and it's a great opportunity to, pick up a contract in one of those many professional leagues around the world. So as you mentioned, Lisa, just two nights until kick-off. Thursday night against Norway. Big challenge for the Ferns. This is the world number 13th ranked side, and it will no doubt be the toughest test of the group stage. And Eden Park is sold out, set to be a huge occasion. So whether they're playing their first season like Michaela or their 17th, this is the pinnacle for these football Ferns in their footballing lives.
Let's move on to cricket. Black Caps set for a massive summer of cricket after the World Cup. That's if summer ever arrives, Jonty. Do tell us more.
Well, here's hoping, Lisa. Well, if it does, there'll be an absolute feast of cricket for fans to enjoy. So the big talking points of the schedule, which released today, will be home test series against the Proteas from South Africa, and of course the world champion Australians. Now the Australians haven't been here since 2016, so it's been a long time between drinks. It was, of course, Brendan McCullum's swan song as Black Cap skipper, so a fair while, and New Zealand were soundly beaten in those two tests, so Kiwis will be pretty keen on some revenge. The summer will get underway against Bangladesh in mid-December, and so this is only a month after the Cricket World Cup, so a pretty quick turnaround for our lads. Of course, last summer our fans were deprived of the Black Caps in New Zealand. They were over in Pakistan for the summer, so fans are going to be itching to see our boys back on the screen. Another highlight of the schedule released today was the White Ferns. They'll have series against Pakistan and England, and New Zealand Cricket have deliberately booked the men's and women's to play consecutive games at the same venues. So these double headers, it's going to give fans a chance to see the Black Caps and White Ferns in the same place. So, it's a great move for the women's game to really build on the momentum from the World Cup.
Jonty, before you go, who did you draw in the sweepstake for the Footy World Cup?
I got France, so pretty happy with that, yeah.
Thank you, Jonty. Sports reporter Jonty Dine there. One of the country's largest supermarket chains is promising a price shake-up as part of a major rebrand, but it's pretty light on details. Countdown stores are relaunching as Woolworths by early 2024 as part of a $400 million 3-year makeover. The chain says it will refresh its loyalty program, and shoppers can expect to see more value, sharing the best of what the Woolworths Group has to offer. So I asked Managing Director of Countdown and Woolworths Group, Spencer Son, how much cheaper that will make food and groceries for New Zealand shoppers.
Yeah, so there are a number of initiatives, Lisa. I mean, some of them are commercially sensitive in terms of how they land, but one of them you might be familiar with is the permanent 20% saving on odd bunch of fruit and veggies when compared to standard packs. So that's something tangible, but it's one of many. I think
And that's one that exists, Spencer. That's one that we know about, right? So you're making this announcement, a bold announcement today, saying they can expect greater value. That odd bunch deal already exists. So what new value are they going to see in you?
The just on everyday rewards is the big game changer, Lisa. I think when that lands next year. So our one card program, our current New Zealand loyalty program, has a complete refresh. We currently have the relationship with AA Smart Fuel, and when that comes to an end, we are completely refreshing our everyday rewards program, which lands in New Zealand early next year.
So this is the countdown card, Spencer. So you spend a buck. You spend a buck and you get 1 point on your card. You get to 2,000 points and you get a $15 voucher, right? That's it in a nutshell.
This is the one card program, Lisa, and there's lots to talk about that program as we get closer to the launch next year.
Come on, give us a taster. Give us a taster, Spencer, because people are struggling with the cost of living, right? And they look at that deal that I've just outlined. Spend $1, get a point on the card. You have to get 2,000 points before you get $15. That's 0.75% return on your $2,000, right? So how much better is it going to be?
What I'm excited about, Lisa, about the Everyday Rewards program is that it is exactly far more oriented towards food, which is the real struggle for New Zealanders at the moment. I'd love to tell you more about it, but we are in the process of, there's quite a bit in the proposition. we will communicate as frequently as we can and in as detailed a way as we can. We just can't disclose all of that right now, other than to say it's coming.
Let me put it another way, because I understand you have to keep some things under your hat, right? The specifics. What guarantee, without revealing the specifics, what guarantee can you give to shoppers that across the board they're going to see you get sharper with your prices?
Lisa, I would say that price is absolutely critical, and we're very focused on that. But what our transformation talks about is everything related to value. Customers also want more convenience from us. What our transformation does is increases that. We will be having more convenient shopping experiences. We're investing into our e-commerce business. The quality of our fresh food. We've put a lot of building blocks in place to make sure that your fruit and veggies last longer. That's something we should be committing to New Zealanders, so that when you spend your well-earned money in our stores, that you're getting value for that. Convenience I've spoken about, innovation and bringing newness. So it's creating more inspiring shopping experiences. So price is fundamentally important, don't get me wrong, but our transformation deals with everything related to giving our customers value for money.
Spencer, I'm going to put some money on this. I think that the priority will be cheaper groceries for consumers rather than an inspiring environment. So I'll ask you this. How do you reckon the prices in Australia, in Woolworths in Australia, compare with your supermarkets here in New Zealand? Do you reckon it's cheaper offshore in Oz or cheaper here in New Zealand?
I mean, it's a great question. And of course, as you know, our New Zealand buying teams run separately from our Australian buying teams. And the prices, there are a lot of factors that go into price, and the food prices here in New Zealand. The size of our market is a factor. Where we're located and the cost to ship goods here is a factor. Our labour costs is a factor. And then, of course, GST, where Kiwis pay 15% more for fruit and veggies as a result of GST versus in Australia where GST has been removed from many of the essential foods. So quite difficult to make a like-for-like comparison on those two. I think the thing I would want to say to you very clearly, Lisa, is as a result of this transformation, not a single price is going to be increased in our business. This is a significant change. We've been planning for it for a long time. And so the figures quoted relate to the transformation of our business, not the increase of food in our stores.
Right, so that's the 400 million you're spending on it, because, again, I reckon there'd be some people out there who would say, I don't care what the sign looks like above the supermarket, take $400 million off the cost of the groceries.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's why, in fact, the sign change is the big news, but it's the very small part of the transformation of our business. It's all of the other things I've spoken about. What customers can expect from us is better value, markedly improved fresh, more convenient ways to shop.
And that was the Managing Director of Countdown and Woolworths Group, Spencer Son. Do let us know your thoughts on that one. Would you rather a more inspiring shopping environment, or would you like cheaper groceries and food? 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 26 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ko taku hoa inai called Giles Beckford. Beckford with business. He's here live from Wellington. Another low opportunistic offer for a listed company. Now, this one is for Metro Performance Glass. Giles, tell us more, please.
Kia ora to you, Lisa. Yes, Metro Performance Glass. They do double glazing. They do big industrial glass, commercial glass products here and in Australia. They've been what can only be described as a serial disappointment since they listed on the stock exchange back in 2014, I think it was. They listed at $1.75. Their share price peaked at $22.30 in 2016. Now, a couple of shareholders have put their stakes together. They're a couple of well-known and veteran businessmen, Peter Wells, who is the founder of Vulcan Steel, and Peter Masfen, who many people will remember was involved in the wine industry. They have between them 25% stake of Metro Glass. They offered 18 cents a share today, and the last price before trading was halted in Metro Glass was 15.7 cents a share. So you can see they were being a little on the opportunistic side. Now, I think they may have some disagreements with the way the company is being directed. It's a company that's failed to meet its earnings targets. It's been shackled with debt. Undoubtedly, it's been hit by a construction sector which has been feeling the headwinds of supply chain disruptions and COVID and labour shortages and the like. But it's a company which has its back to the wall. And as one analyst put it to me this afternoon, the vultures are circling over the injured beast. Now, we'll wait and see. The board came back quite quickly this afternoon and said, too low, go away. We're not even entertaining you. Interestingly, the company said that Peter Masfen, through some of his investment arms, had been having confidential inquiries with them in May and June. And I'm interested because that wasn't disclosed, or I haven't seen it disclosed anywhere to the stock exchange, and quite possibly should have been. Anyway, we'll wait and see on this one. The company declined an interview this afternoon. They say there's an annual meeting in a couple of weeks' time. We may have some more to say, but it's no surprise this is one that's got more to run.
And you have details of fall and steeper fall of Eric Watson. I thought he'd already roly-polied to the bottom of the hill.
Well, perhaps this is a rebound or whatever, I don't know. And perhaps this is the dead cat bounce. He's fighting so many corporate bushfires, it's not funny. And what he's doing it on, apart from the smell of an oily rag, I don't know. And where he is, we don't know. But the liquidators have come out and finally said, following a High Court judgment, the High Court said Eric Watson has got to pay $59 million which he owes to the Cullen Group, which was, of course, his investment arm. And if he doesn't do it, then you can go ahead and you can serve bankruptcy papers on him. So the liquidators have said, he hasn't coughed up the money. We're going to chase him. Good luck finding him to be able to serve the papers. But it may well be that they'll go back to the court, say, we've looked everywhere. The last known address, I think, for Watson was in Ibiza, which, of course, is Spain in the Med, Party Central, although I'm not sure that he's got the dollars to actually party away. Remembering, this is just the latest in a long chain of corporate scandals or disappointments with him. It stems from his fight with Owen Glenn when they owned the Warriors together and they were involved in business. IRD has been chasing him for unpaid taxes. He's involved in an insider trading alleged case in the States. He served 4 months in a London prison for contempt of court. It's just a litany of disaster for him. I don't think anybody's going to get the money, but at least there'll be perhaps a ruling that he is a bankrupt. We'll wait and see. It's not the last. We will hear from him or of him again. Interestingly, on his Twitter feed, he says, and he hasn't posted for a while, but his slogan says, "Proud Kiwi, the rest depends on what you've read and what you believe."
And Giles, let's take a spin around the markets.
Share market trimmed its losses, a small 6-point loss today, 11,933. New Zealand dollar, 63.4 US cents, 92.8 Australian. Whetting your appetite for tomorrow. Second quarter inflation numbers. The expectations are for a quarterly rise of 1%, but the annual rate to fall from 6.7 to 5.9. We'll pull the sweepstake results out tomorrow afternoon.
Look forward to it, Giles. Thank you for that. That is our business editor, Giles Beckford, joining us live from Wellington. 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of it coming in on our interview with the Managing Director of Countdown Woolworths. This is the $400 relaunch revamp. They're rebranding from Countdown to Woolworths. They say they're going to make some changes with pricing as well. Andrew from Christchurch has got in touch and says, Countdown, 400 million, followed by 3 exclamation marks. Take it off our grocery prices. No one cares about the other stuff, reckons Andrew. Robin from Mount Albert says $8.50 for 500 grams of Anchor and or Tararua butter today at Countdown St Luke's. Outrageous. 3 exclamation marks used there too. Daylight robbery, says Robin. Do keep your feedback coming. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program tonight. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anna Thomas, mina pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. New Zealand Olympic Committee CEO Nikki Nicol has told Checkpoint that Aotearoa New Zealand should maintain its aim of bidding for the 2034 Commonwealth Games, and there's not time to try to host the 2026 event. The Australian state of Victoria has pulled out of hosting the Games in 3 years after costs rocketed from $2.6 billion towards $7 billion. A scathing inquiry has criticised the former Minister Michael Wood for what it calls a worrying and ongoing lack of awareness surrounding his management of conflicts of interest. Mr Wood has been referred to Parliament's Privileges Committee, where MPs will consider whether he is guilty of contempt. Warkworth residents in Auckland's North Shore say the $880 million Puhoi to Warkworth highway should have been built with more foresight, given Waka Kotahi's knowledge of land instability. Until now, undisclosed report shows there were 19 landslides during the construction of the highway. The White House says Russia's decision to pull out of the Black Sea grain deal is irresponsible and dangerous and will exacerbate food scarcity. The initiative has provided safe passage for 33 million tonnes of Ukrainian grain over the last year. And communities near the base of Mount Bagano in Papua New Guinea are being told to evacuate 7 days after what the government describes as a mild eruption began. Officials have issued a Stage 3 alert for the mountain in the South Bougainville region. And those are the headlines.
Ngā mihi. Labour's caucus regrouped in the capital today following the release of another bruising poll. With MPs Michael Wood and Kitty Allen returning from leave, the party was hoping to refocus on the election. But by the afternoon, attention shifted back to Mr Wood's handling of his shares. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
Labour's Michael Wood back at Parliament.
Oh, it's good to be back.
The former minister has been on leave since he resigned over his shares shamble last month. The MP for Mount Roskill says he spent the time away putting things right and pondering his political future. He's returned to Wellington, committed to contesting October's election.
Oh, look, I spent the last few weeks on the ground in Mount Roskill, and actually I've had a really good response there. A lot of people have sort of said, look, you silly goose, you got this wrong. You need to sort these things out, get back and get focused on the issues.
But the focus today quickly shifted back to Mr Wood's mishandling of his shares.
I present the report of the Registrar of Pecuniary and Other Specified Interests.
The parliamentary inquiry into Mr Wood's actions reporting back. It found Mr Wood demonstrated a worrying and ongoing lack of awareness over some of his responsibilities. In doing so, the report says Mr Wood damaged his standing as an MP and the trust the public expect to have in their elected representatives. Mr Wood has now been referred to Parliament's Powerful Privileges Committee to determine whether he committed contempt.
The committee will meet in due course to consider next steps.
Mr Wood is the second Labour MP to be referred to the Powerful Committee of Senior MPs this year. Education Minister Jan Tinetti was the first. The committee recently concluded Ms Tinetti misled Parliament due to a high degree of negligence. MPs debated that finding this afternoon.
What we could not understand is how someone who has a ministerial responsibility and not know what's going on in their office.
And a standard of judgment and behaviour that comfortably falls below that which we should expect. We quite simply have a Minister of Education who's responsible for the system, and she doesn't know what's going on in her own office.
Labour's Kitty Allen was among MPs watching that debate. She's back at work today after taking some time away from Parliament following a relationship breakup. The minister was also facing questions about her conduct towards staff. Ms Allen issued an apology on Friday and is now receiving management training.
And so anybody hasn't felt like, it's been good to chuck their boots on and come to work, well, that's something I want to take responsibility for.
Ms Allen says she's now focusing on her portfolios and the upcoming election.
There's a lot of work to be done and, we're just cracking in.
The Labour government is starting to shift its focus towards the election with the release of its election slogan and the promise of policy announcements in the coming weeks. The latest political poll shows National and ACT could form a government, the third survey in a week showing that result. Labour's Willie Jackson says it reflects the public's unhappiness with the government's rolling maul of ministerial muck-ups.
We've had probably the worst couple of months in our term.
But there are just 2 points separating the two major parties in the One News Varian poll. It raises the question, why isn't National polling higher? The party's MPs say it's a matter of timing.
Look, it takes people a fair bit of time to actually work out that there is an election about to happen.
I think there's still a lot of people out there that are quite uncertain about which way to go.
There's a long way to run. We all get very excited around here in Wellington, but actually many New Zealanders tune in for those last 6 to 7 weeks of the election campaign.
A campaign that is fast approaching.
Katie Scotcher reporting there. June hoons are allegedly driving other beachgoers off the Potu Peninsula on the Kaipara Harbour due to high speeds and dangerous manoeuvres. Locals and regular visitors say four-wheel drivers and off-road bikes are dominating Repero Beach, driving irresponsibly and freedom camping and leaving behind their waste. And the problem is the stretch of beach is legally a road, complicating any crackdown. Auckland-based author Matt Elliott has close family ties to the area and visits regularly. He joins us now. Kia ora, Matt.
Hello, Lisa.
How bad is it in that area?
Well, on Friday it was particularly bad. People at Blinks Gully were quite astounded, and in other areas too, about the volume of traffic of these four-wheel drives that were congregating at Potu. It was obviously a very well organised and arranged meet of these guys in their vehicles, and there were just literally swarms of the vehicles going down the beach and down the Poto Road to meet down at Poto.
Any near misses?
There was actually a near miss with a motorbike. First thing on Friday, our family had come out to Glinks to spend the day out at Glinks Gully, and a motorbike went through the dunes only seconds after a 2-year-old had gone walking in that area and totally frightened the living daylights out of the parents who packed up and left the beach. There was a fatality at the beach, a similar sort of scenario 15 years ago, and so there's a lot of concern and worry about something happening again because these guys on their bikes, in the dunes and on their cars on the beach, they've got no consideration for anybody else. There's a really serious safety issue.
And along with the safety issue, I understand that they're making a fair bit of mess. Can you tell us about that? And also, what about the wildlife?
Yes, the mess. There have been some very diligent batch owners and residents at Glinks Gully particularly who spend their summers going round north and south of the camp, picking up discarded bottles, wet wipes that have been used when people have been toileting, all sorts of rubbish. There have been bonfires that have been built and they've been so hot that all the glass bottles that have been thrown in there have just melted. So there's enormous amounts of waste that have been picked up, left behind and then picked up by other people. And in terms of wildlife, a seal was deliberately run over last summer. There was a seal on the beach on Saturday afternoon that a relation of mine, Gail Hoddenot, who's very active at Glinks Gully, spent an hour trying to protect from four-wheel drives going up and down the beach. There are, we now know, there a rare New Zealand skink called the Tatahi skink. I've been doing some observations on those for about 3 years, so we know they're in the dunes. There's the black Northland katipo, and when they get off-road and they're going up into the cliffs and the dunes, the erosion is extraordinary. It's driving the farmers wild because when the winds come up, the sand is blowing up onto the paddocks. Huge environmental issue, but the real concern is about the possible dangers to people, innocent people who are out at the beach, and the drivers themselves, because they're not observing how they should drive on the beach in terms of where they are on the beach and so on. it's a matter for Cope District Council, but the police too.
Appreciate your time on that, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Matt Elliott, who is among those who have concerns about these four-wheel drivers and people on off-road motorbikes on the beach there on the Kaipara Peninsula. Now, police say they have heard anecdotal reports of some issues around the behaviour of drivers in the area. 9 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A chunk of junk that has quite literally appeared out of the blue on a Western Australia beach is causing some head scratching. Speculation is rife about what the giant golden cylindrical object on sandy Jurien Bay is. Space junk, part of a downed aircraft, UFO. Your guess is as good as ours, so time to phone an expert, and joining me now is Australian National University astrophysicist Dr. Brad Tucker. Hi, Brad. What can you tell us about this thing? Give us a bit of a description for those people who haven't seen it.
Yeah, look, hunk of junk is mostly right. Yeah, definitely a cylindrical object. It's a few meters tall and a few meters in circumference that washed up on the shore. It definitely has a very manufactured appearance, meaning clearly not just, a scrap metal or something like that, something clearly fabricated to survive the elements and outside. And so it's kind of obviously bears resemblance to lots of pieces of rocket bits. So it's very, very round, very smooth, very finely manufactured. So obviously a lot of people jump to, hey, could it be space junk? And given we are seeing quite a few evidence and pieces of space debris landing in places in the past year or two, it's definitely a very logical jump to conclusions that someone may have.
You say washed up, so you think it did come from the water rather than just plop straight out of the sky?
That's right. So it definitely looks like it's been in the water. So there's a few things. You can kind of see this water line on the bottom. There even looks like there's barnacles on it. And there's really no impact on the ground where it kind of sits. It really looks like it's washed up on shore rather than fallen from the sky. And given the large size of this, it's clearly metal. If it had fallen from the sky, it definitely would have left more of an impact on the sand than what we see currently.
So if it is space junk, is it safe?
So this is a good point. And the police cordon off the area. And my rule of space junk is like Australian animals, don't touch it unless you know what you're doing. There are bits that can be hazardous. So two worries you have are a lot of spacecraft and equipment have carbon fiber. When carbon fiber burns, it can be a bit hazardous respiratory-wise. More importantly, if this is part of what we call the second or third stage of a rocket, kind of the top parts that still have tanks of fuel and engines, a lot of the fuel can be hydrazine. And hydrazine is very nasty, very carcinogenic. You do not want to come in contact with it. So it definitely can pose a risk if you know what it is and what you're doing. And so trying to identify exactly what it is, if it's space junk, where it came from, what part it belonged to, and then any hazardous material. So it's definitely a process that has to go through to confirm or not confirm how safe it is.
Brad, can you rule out that it's not part of an aeroplane? Because there has been speculation, MH370, everyone wants to solve the mystery. Can you rule out that this isn't a bit of an aeroplane?
So a lot of people said, yeah, it's not probably quite airplane in terms of the shape and size. This would be, even for an airplane, it's a fairly large part given that it's a chunk and broken off bit. So it definitely looks that if it is on, manufactured to some degree, either spacecraft or rocket related, or even maybe something marine related, but it definitely doesn't appear to be aircraft related. But you're right, everyone jumped to MH370, and I think those were the first things that were kind of ruled out.
Appreciate you clearing that up for us. Thank you for joining us. That's Dr. Brad Tucker, who is an astrophysicist there, talking about this object, and do check out the pictures that is washed up on the beach in Australia. They're the hot favourites to take out the Women's World Cup, and US fans are making their way in big numbers here to support their team. The team will be based in Auckland, and its fans are flocking to get amongst the FIFA fever. Delphine Herbert has the story.
The event has US fans excited. An estimated 15,000 fans will be travelling to Aotearoa from the United States alone. For Kristen Parasol, it's been her dream for years.
As soon as 2019 ended, I regretted not going to France, so I just started saving money, putting as much money aside as I could, and started saving Sky Miles for the flights. And I've been planning this for 4 years, so I probably would have went even if they were playing in Antarctica.
She's flown over from the US and is in Brisbane before heading to New Zealand. Kristen also created a Facebook page for US fans coming here that's already got more than 8,000 followers. Alex Navarro is flying into Auckland from San Francisco with her wife and 2 daughters and says they were thrilled to find out where the Cup was being hosted.
It didn't matter where it was going to be, we were going to go. And New Zealand is just a beautiful country. I mean, I'm guessing the pictures don't do it justice.
She's excited to watch the US and Dutch teams play and feel the atmosphere.
I think that there's nothing that makes me proud than to see other girls being the badasses that they are and the wonderful things that they're doing.
For Heidi Slinkman, her love for the game was solidified when she got to watch the 2015 finals from her hospital bed in Wisconsin when waiting for the arrival of her daughter, Victoria.
The whole delivery unit in the hospital was cheering on the national team. We had it on all of the TVs, screens, and it was awesome. And so the game ended, and I was happy to see that I didn't miss it because I kept saying to her, and I said a prayer, please don't come during World Cup finals.
She was relieved when her daughter did not come during the finals, so she was able to see goals from one of her favourite forward and midfield players at the time, Carly Lloyd. Heidi got to meet her a few years later, which made her add attending a FIFA World Cup to her bucket list.
So I have a photograph now with Carly, and I was wearing her jersey, number 10. That moment solidified. I was like, I have to get to the World Cup.
Heidi will be travelling from Wisconsin and also plans to eat her way through the country. For Randall King and his family, the trip from Kentucky is sentimental.
Growing up as a kid, we always knew that my dad had lived here when he was young, and he had stuff on his shelves from the time he was over here, and it was always it never seemed like something that we'd ever get to actually all go together.
He says it was his idea to make this trip work, to visit the country where his dad lived as a young man. He says his father has not been back in 50 years.
And I don't think I would have done that if it had been just, another country. I think it just tying to the fact that it's a chance to bring my dad, and also so that he could show, some of his kids and his wife, kind of show off the country to them.
The FIFA Women's World Cup begins on Thursday, with the first game being held in New Zealand at Auckland's Eden Park.
Right, let's stick with the sports theme. Some feedback on the Commonwealth Games. This is after Victoria says it's not going to host them anymore, 2026. No way should we have the Commonwealth Games, this person says. Climate crisis, hundreds of people flying to New Zealand. Costs will be horrendous and taxpayers are struggling already. Another in a similar vein, no way. Redirect the money to the failing infrastructure, including for health. No to the Commonwealth Games, this listener says. We're all struggling now and that will continue to get worse. There is no benefit from spending billions of our tax dollars on a sporting event. I do not want us to waste $1 on any games, says this listener. Good on you, Victoria, for being realistic. If only we had a government like that, we would not have billions going to light rail. But another person says Victoria's decision to cancel the games should be taken up by New Zealand. We have world-class athletes and facilities throughout New Zealand for various games. The investment in the games would be a big boost to the economy. As it is, New Zealand has hosted top events: Men's Rugby World Cup, Women's Cricket, Women's Rugby World Cup, joint with Australia, the FIFA Women's Football Club. I'd be happy to go to the games. I'd even volunteer.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The father of the 3 girls killed by their mother in their Timaru home has told a court that his children preferred him and his wife was not a nurturing mother. Lauren Ann Dickerson has pleaded not guilty to all 3 murder charges. Video footage of Graham Dickerson's 2021 police interview following the deaths played in court. The court ruled footage of Dr. Dickerson not be recorded and his comments are revoiced.
She would always make sure that there were clean clothes, food to eat. She always made sure the kids are where they needed to be. She was not a nurturing mother. The kids preferred me. Not so much Liane anymore because she's a big girl, but the twins definitely preferred me.
Graham Dickerson will be cross-examined by the defence tomorrow morning. The news that the 2026 Commonwealth Games are in doubt came as a shock to the New Zealand Olympic Committee. The host, the Australian state of Victoria, has pulled out due to budget blowouts. Commonwealth Sport struggled to find a host city before Victoria volunteered last year, and the 2022 Games only happened after Birmingham stepped in late. NZOC's Chief Executive Nikki Nicol says there were no signs of a problem, but she doesn't believe the withdrawal signals the beginning of the end for the Games.
Absolutely not. And I think, 12 months ago, we were all so enthralled with Birmingham. Our athletes were amazing, 50 medals across the team. The event itself was spectacular. And, the positive impact into that community post as well has also been really positive. So we know the model can work. We know there is a role for sport in the Commonwealth.
A scathing inquiry has criticised the former Minister Michael Wood for a worrying and ongoing lack of awareness surrounding his management of conflicts of interest. Mr Wood has now been referred to Parliament's Privileges Committee. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The inquiry, led by the top public servant Sir Martin Weavers, is highly critical of Mr Wood, saying he did not turn his mind to his interests as he should have. Mr Wood resigned as a minister last month after failing to disclose a range of shares he owned. Sir Martin described Mr Wood as tardy in correcting errors and said he'd damaged his standing as an MP as well as public trust and confidence. The Privileges Committee will now consider whether Mr Wood is guilty of contempt of Parliament.
Warkworth residents in Auckland's North Shore say the Puhoi to Warkworth highway should have been built with more foresight, given Waka Kotahi's knowledge of the risks in the area. Cracks have appeared in concrete barriers and there is a slow-moving landslide in a section near the Warkworth end of the highway. The Transport Minister says he has asked for an urgent briefing on the road. Several locals told RNZ they're disappointed.
It would be nice to think that they would be a little bit more forearmed in knowing that these things, they have been happening.
If they knew that there was going to be instability, surely they could have either, reinforced it better or just gone a different way.
An until now undisclosed report to Waka Kotahi shows the area has had land instability for years, but was worsened by the January floods. By late 2019, there had already been 19 landslides during the construction of the highway. The Nurses Union says its members employed by Te Whatu Ora have received a new collective agreement offer from the employer. New Zealand Nurses Organisation Chief Executive Paul Galter says the offer is an improvement, but he says there is still a significant gap between that and what members have claimed for pay, safe staffing and health and safety improvements. He says the offer comes a day before a ballot for a 24-hour strike next month is due to close. Paul Galter says if members vote for the strike, it will go ahead unless they then vote to ratify the new offer. Members will vote on the offer in the first week of August. Communities near the base of Mount Bagano in Papua New Guinea are being told to evacuate 7 days after what the government describes as a mild eruption began. Officials have issued a Stage 3 alert for the mountain in the South Bougainville region. Residents of 6 villages near the base of the volcano have been told to evacuate immediately to the district station at Torokina. Those living in another 6 villages where heavy ashfall has contaminated water sources have been asked to move to the disaster centre at the Wakunai district station. Yesterday, the government said there had been a significant amount of ashfall and lava flow. The New Zealand government has rejected claims by Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare that it withheld $15 million promised to the country. On Monday, Mr Sogavare told local media the Australia and New Zealand governments had promised budget support but changed their position and delayed their assistance. He says this has pushed Solomon Islands to seek China's support. However, a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade spokesperson denied Mr Sogavare's claims. The spokesperson says New Zealand provided $10.1 million in budget support to Solomon Islands over the past year, including for education, economic reform and Pacific Games support. And the flood-prone Waiho River may threaten Franz Joseph's wastewater treatment plant and oxidation ponds and rural properties after changing its course. The main channel of the river has deflected to the true right due to gravel build-up and created an additional channel into the much smaller Tatare catchment. West Coast Regional Council Chief Executive Darryl Liu says the council is investigating the ramifications.
The wastewater system for the township of Franz Joseph and the oxidation ponds are potentially threatened by the river changing course, but also the prospect is that the flow of the Waiho River will tip across into the neighbouring catchment called the Tartari catchment.
The council is meeting to discuss solutions next month, and that's the news.
I remember thinking two things when he punched me, one of which was, oh man, I'm going to be really late for work. But the other thing was, what did he mean about the United Nations?
As we embark upon an election campaign, political violence is a clear and present danger in Aotearoa.
I don't think I have a day here where I don't have threats and attacks.
Mis- and disinformation is rampant across online spaces. I'm Susie Ferguson, creator of Undercurrent, an RNZ documentary series on misinformation. Listen online and on RNZ National from July the 20th.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. For the western areas from Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel Peninsula, Taumaranui and Taihape. Partly cloudy with isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather. Bay of Plenty and Taupo, also Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa. Generally fine, but the odd shower tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, often cloudy with showers, turning to rain about southern Westland tomorrow evening, possibly heavy. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine with high cloud, isolated showers developing about Nelson and the Marlborough Sounds tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, excluding Stewart Island, mostly fine, rain spreading slowly north tomorrow afternoon and evening, with heavy falls and snow lowering to 300 metres. Fiordland and Stewart Island, periods of rain, possibly heavy tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine and cloudy periods. RNZ National, it is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with Lisa Owen.
Thank you, Anna. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Locals in the northern part of Auckland are disappointed parts of the Puhoi to Warkworth Highway is beginning to subside just a month since it opened. Cracks have appeared in concrete barriers and there is a slow-moving landslide in a section near the Warkworth end. A report to Waka Kotahi shows the area has had land instability for years, and the agency was told in April the landslide had been reactivated after the January floods. By late 2019, there'd already been 19 landslides during the construction of the project. Our reporter Lucy Sear has spoken to people in Warkworth.
Locals waited for years for this highway and now feel let down. Some say Waka Kotahi should have planned better, given their knowledge of the risks in the area.
It would be nice to think that they would be a little bit more forearmed in knowing that these things, they have been happening.
If they knew that there was going to be instability, surely they could have either, reinforced it better or just gone a different way.
Others say they're not surprised.
It's a difficult piece of land and it was always going to have problems.
We live in an unstable area. And that goes all the way back.
It was a matter of time before this was going to happen, but it's unfortunate this happened so soon.
And while the report says the landslide is unlikely to fail rapidly and emergency repairs are underway, Warkworth shop owner Sammy Nichols says she feels nervous about it.
It makes me a little bit anxious to potentially use that motorway system, especially during winter and all this rain.
Sammy Nichols says she's concerned that any remedial works and road closures would impact local businesses who are just starting to benefit from the increase in customers after the new highway opening. Meanwhile, others like Warkworth local Phil Tomlinson says he has confidence in the engineering of the highway and that the extreme weather earlier this year would have been challenging for any infrastructure.
Our land is always changing, and we do have exceptional weather in the last 12 or 18 months, rainfall wise, so it's a damn good test for any engineering.
But Ben Cullen, who's driven up for a day trip from Whangaparoa, says the rain shouldn't be an excuse and believes Waka Kotahi could have done a better job.
You've got to be aware of what you're building on and build for the conditions. Infrastructure that's supposed to last for generations, and it's just a bit of a shame.
The MP for the area, Chris Penk, says the communication about the land instability has been lacking.
I'm a bit surprised that this has now arisen following the grand opening, in which it clearly wasn't communicated to the Prime Minister or myself as local MP, or probably a lot of other people who would have been quite interested.
And Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says the $880 million spent on the project could have been better spent.
It was a mistake in the first place. For that amount of money, they could have three-laned all the way to Whangarei. Now we find that it's got a landslide.
The Transport Minister David Parker has asked for an urgent briefing about the motorway. Waka Kotahi says concrete barriers and a temporary traffic management plan are in place to ensure the landslide poses no risk to people travelling.
And that was Lucy Sear reporting. Now, a lot of you are getting in touch about our earlier interview with Countdown, so let's go to some of your feedback now. This is on the $400 million rebrand. They're going to be Woolworths again by 2024. They say that you can look forward to better value, though, in food and grocery prices, but they're a bit short on specifics. That didn't pass you by. This person says, I ain't inspired by food I can't afford. Another says, the Countdown guy was full of bluster and bombast. Countdown, put your prices down or stand down and, well, shut up, says that listener. Another says, get real. The only issue right now is cost when it comes to groceries. More convenient and long-lasting fruit and veg not rating very high in our household right now. And this one, before we move on, I almost choked when I heard that we could expect more inspiring shopping experiences. Please, this person says, that is not what we want. Meteorologists say temperatures across southern Europe will hit new record highs this week, with the European Space Agency warning Italy, Spain, France, Poland and Germany will face severe and prolonged heat that could last into August. And in the United States, a third of Americans have been placed under heat advisories as California's Death Valley also hits near record temperatures. The ABC's Alexandra Humphreys reports.
Death Valley National Park in the desert west of Las Vegas is the hottest place on Earth. This week, the aptly named Furnace Creek hit 53 degrees Celsius, just shy of the record 56 degrees it hit in 1913. Ben is a concierge at the Panamint Springs Resort at Death Valley. He says it's about as hot as anyone will experience.
This past weekend, though, we did have what's called a heat dome throughout the whole state. Basically a heat wave where a lot of the state had the potential to see record-breaking heat out here in Death Valley, in the part that we're in Panamint Springs. We saw temperatures of around 117. Other areas saw temperatures of around 120 plus degrees Fahrenheit.
120 degrees Fahrenheit is about 48 degrees Celsius. It's so hot, when driving around the mountains near Death Valley, you have to be careful not to overuse your brakes so they don't overheat.
To all of our guests and pass-throughs, we tell them to make sure they got plenty of water on them because there is no cell service throughout the park. So, God forbid if you break down, you're going to need to be able to stay hydrated. Make sure you got plenty of gas in your car at all times so that you can run that air conditioning. We also tell people make sure they got plenty of coolant in their vehicle because coolant can tend to evaporate.
Giovanna Ponce is a Death Valley park ranger.
Death Valley is definitely getting hotter with every summer. We're always breaking heat records, and it's only going to keep getting hotter from here. In fact, 7 of Death Valley's hottest summers, of Death Valley's top 10 hottest summers, happened just in the last 10 years.
The stretch of hot weather has seen about a third of Americans placed under some type of heat advisory. A heat wave in parts of the country's south and Midwest killed more than a dozen people in June. The city of Phoenix, Arizona, has equalled its record of 18 days with temperatures above 43 degrees Celsius. It's not just North America. Parts of northwestern China hit 52 degrees on the weekend. Europe is also sweltering. Andalusia in Spain has hit 44 degrees Celsius. On the Italian island of Sicily, temperatures topped 43 degrees, and Sardinia is forecast to get even hotter. Wildfires outside Athens have forced thousands to flee seaside resorts as fire crews also battle blazes in Swiss mountain villages and on the Canary island of La Palma. Stefano Federico is a researcher at Italy's National Council of Research.
From the point of view of the heat wave, this is a classic heat wave of African origin. What distinguishes it from the previous ones we have had this year is its intensity, i.e. a heat wave that has a higher temperature, and in several cities and in several areas of Italy will have temperatures above the average for the period of between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius, so much higher than average temperatures.
France's Public Health Agency says the heat wave will likely hospitalise or kill many people. New research suggests there were over 61,000 heat-related deaths last European summer. Scientists say there is a chance that 2023 will go down as the hottest year since records began.
Meanwhile, as mentioned in Alexandra's story, extreme temperatures have already forced Greek authorities to close the Acropolis. But now a raging wildfire near Athens has prompted authorities to evacuate thousands of seaside homes. The fire broke out in Kouvaras, roughly 27 kilometres southeast of the capital, where 150 firefighters are on the scene, using 40 fire appliances and 11 water-dumping aircraft to get the blaze under control. Greece's fire service also reported that a second blaze had broken out in woods near the resort town of Loutraki, about 90 kilometres west of Athens. Deutsche Welle's Stacey Bivens reports.
Greece is burning. Carried by fast-moving winds, flames hopscotch from one home and business to another. The source, 2 raging fires, one burning to the southeast of the capital Athens and the other to the west of it. As billowing smoke blanketed villages, the blaze spread across 12 kilometers in just 2 hours, forcing emergency crews to evacuate children at a summer camp by the hundreds in the city of Kouvaras.
There are approximately 1,500 children. We are making every effort to move them to safety by bus. The municipality has already taken care of the accommodation for them.
In Calavia, blazes engulfed horse stables. Workers race to get the horses out and transport them to safety. About 200 firemen fought flames from land and air with 70 trucks and 16 helicopters as fires threatened homes near the seaside. Crews also evacuated towns with the help of the military. All of this just as Greeks were experiencing a reprieve from record-high temperatures. Southern Europe has been gripped by a heat wave since last week, with temperatures reaching 44 degrees Celsius. Greek meteorologists warn that a second heat wave is on the way and that more fires may follow.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A new class of drugs is being hailed as a turning point in the fight against Alzheimer's. For decades, treatments have eluded researchers, but a global clinical trial has shown that 3 new drugs can slow the pace of the disease, which affects memory and other mental functions. The ABC's Alison Branley reports.
Jan Cody didn't realise she was developing Alzheimer's disease.
until her adult children met to discuss her mental decline. The 75-year-old was forced to give up her job as a psychologist, and daily activities like cooking and driving followed soon after.
My world shrank. My friends were all busy working or doing whatever, etc., and I wasn't in the same groove with that.
The prognosis from doctors treating the Melbourne grandmother was grim.
Well, there's really no medication to take.
But there's now a glimmer of hope for patients like Jan, with trials showing 3 different potential treatments can successfully slow the progress of the disease in some people. The latest is donanemab, which has been able to slow the rate of mental decline by up to 35% in patients in the early stages of the disease. The results of an international trial of the drug involving 1,700 patients have been handed down at an international conference in the Netherlands.
I would regard this as the end of the beginning in Alzheimer's therapies.
Associate Professor Michael Woodward is a geriatrician attending the conference. He's been involved in Alzheimer's research for decades.
This is absolutely a breakthrough. I know the word breakthrough is used perhaps a little too often, but this is a major breakthrough.
Associate Professor Stephen McFarlane from the Dementia Centre in Victoria ran one of the 8 Australian sites taking part in the trial.
So it's a class of drug called monoclonal antibodies, which is a way of essentially using our body's own immune defences to target one of the proteins, amyloid, that is one of the key markers in the brain of Alzheimer's disease.
All 3 of the new drugs about to hit the market are only effective in people in the early stages of the disease. Even then, there's risks of severe bleeding and swelling in the brain in some patients. 3 people in the most recent trial died. And Stephen McFarlane warns this new class of drugs will put extra strain on existing health infrastructure, with patients needing regular intravenous infusions and access to PET scans. But earlier diagnosis will improve patient outcomes.
And we know in Australia that on average there's about a 3-year delay before when people first experience symptoms of memory loss and actually receiving a diagnosis.
Only one of the 3 therapies has been sent to Australia's regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, for approval. The results have been published in the medical journal JAMA.
The United Nations is warning that Russia's decision not to renew a crucial grain deal that allowed Ukraine to export grain through the Black Sea will have worldwide ramifications. The deal was hailed as halting a potential global food emergency when it was brokered last year. The Kremlin's decision follows complaints by Moscow about obstacles to its own exports of grain and fertiliser. Western leaders have accused Russia's President Vladimir Putin of using hunger as a weapon. Deutsche Welle's Nita Blake-Person reports.
Loaded with Ukrainian grain, this ship was the last to leave the country before Russia pulled the pin on a crucial wartime deal. The year-long pact had allowed safe passage of exports through the Black Sea. It helped bring down global food prices and ensured vital supplies of wheat and maize made it to parts of Africa. With the deal off, there are grave concerns about international food security.
We need to understand that a lot of countries, including countries such as Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, are dependent on food imports from Ukraine. So it does hamper availability and accessibility to food for many countries.
The Kremlin blamed its withdrawal on unmet demands to improve conditions for its own grain and fertiliser exports. Despite complaints over restrictions, Russia's shipped record amounts of wheat since last year. The United Nations says it presented Russia with options to keep the deal alive without success.
Ultimately, participation in these agreements is a choice, but struggling people everywhere and developing countries don't have a choice. Hundreds of millions of people face hunger and consumers are confronting a global cost of living crisis, and they will pay the price.
Turkey worked with the UN to secure the grain deal last year and remains hopeful it could be revived.
Despite today's statement, I believe that the President of the Russian Federation, my friend Mr. Putin, wants this humanitarian bridge to continue.
The EU and the US are among a growing chorus of countries urging Russia to reconsider. With wheat prices already rising, many are bracing for food prices and hunger to ramp up if a new deal can't be reached.
Scientists and Indigenous rangers in Australia are studying whether a recovery in the number of humpback whales is why they are returning to Northern Territory waters to calve. The ABC's Jane Barden has more.
The humpback whale is a totem of Bulgal Ranger Tim Berber's Wodjikan culture, and the waters and coastline of Fog Bay have sacred sites recording his people's association with them.
Because we're a saltwater people, we're connected with the whale, and so we call him Thatawan. Yeah, that's like a spiritual being for us as well. So
Your people have known for centuries that they're here, obviously.
yeah, that's right. I mean, in these areas, our people used to travel with canoes, and these are big animals, so they were pretty wary of those, you know, in the Fog Bay area.
The annual migration of humpbacks up Australia's east and west coasts is a well-known phenomenon, but until recently, humpback sightings in NT waters were rare. Now 8 Indigenous ranger groups have teamed up with marine scientist Dr. Carol Palmer to try to confirm exactly where the whales have come from and why they've returned to the NT.
So they're from Antarctica, they come up here, they do give birth like they do in the Kimberley, and then come sort of late September they will travel all the way back to Antarctica. But we would just like to confirm that they are that group of humpback whales through some DNA sampling, just getting a little skin sample and then just doing the analysis.
Is it your suspicion that we haven't had them for a number of years, but because the populations have started to recover with the end of whaling in many areas, that now we're getting them back?
Yes, I think so. And we've been able to record them since about 2013 here in Fog Bay. But how they know to come back is the most amazing thing, that they somehow have a link to somewhere very special for them.
The project partners are also taking DNA samples from dolphins and have already proven some are endemic populations. They're trying to determine what impact industrialisation, commercial fish netting and climate change are having on them. Bulgal Ranger Teresa Berber.
We used to see them a lot, but now it's just rare. Dolphins are really rare now to see these days.
And Ranger Teresa Berber ending that report. 18 years after he first signed up, an 80-year-old man with Parkinson's disease will become one of the first private passengers on Virgin Galactic's next flight into space. Former British Olympian John Goodwin enlisted for the mission back in 2005, and he's now being told he will blast off next month. Here's the BBC's Harry Bligh.
John Goodwin is described by Virgin Galactic as a lifelong adventurer. And this mission on board Virgin's second ever commercial spaceflight is far from his first thrill-seeking challenge.
I'd done some pretty exciting things in my time, like canoeing down the Grand Canyon in 1971, the first person to do it in a Canadian double, and canoeing in the Himalayas between the four peaks of Annapurna.
John signed up for the flight in 2005 when he was 62 years old. Now 80, John says he is ready for space, having passed the physical tests, and attributes his unfaltering fitness to having competed in the 1972 Munich Olympic Games. Though in the 18 years since signing up, John has had to overcome some obstacles. In 2014, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a condition which affects the brain.
I inevitably thought that they're going to turn around to me and say, you can no longer go. They haven't done that, and the fact that they haven't done that, I'm very honoured that that's the case.
This will make John the second person with Parkinson's to travel to space, after the NASA astronaut Rich Clifford in 1996. A former businessman in the candy wholesale industry, John spent $250,000 on his ticket and is an investment he stands by.
I think it's exceptional value for money. I mean, it's now $450,000. And so you could say I got a bargain in signing up first of all.
Also on board the VSS Unity, that's Virgin Spaceship Unity, will be Keisha Shahaf, a health and wellness coach from Antigua and Barbuda, and her daughter Anastasia Myers, a philosophy and physics student at the University of Aberdeen. The 3-person crew is expected to launch on August the 10th from Spaceport America in the state of New Mexico.
All right, that's about all we have time for, but let's get to some of your feedback before we head off on the Com Games and whether we should have them here. They're a white elephant, says this person. I'd love to see evidence of positives in the community of Birmingham, UK. The cost of living crisis is much worse there. Mary reckons, yep, vote for the Commonwealth Games be held at a venue that is ready to go without any major infrastructure work. If you missed anything on the program, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up says Guten Morgen to a German football coach who's here for the World Cup. Do tune in for that. It will be a very good morning.
Thanks, Lisa. Now time for the 6:30 headlines. And Lauren Ann Dickerson, who denies murdering her 3 young children in Timaru, has been described by her husband as not a nurturing mother. Video footage of Graham Dickerson's 2021 police interview were played to the High Court at Christchurch. The 2026 Commonwealth Games are in doubt after Victoria, Australia, pulled out amid costs that threaten to hit $7 billion. The Nurses Union says its members employed by Te Whatu Ora have received an improved collective agreement offer a day before a ballot for a 24-hour strike next month is due to close. And air quality alerts are in